Welcome to
Welcome.
That's right. We're like, who's going to say? Okay. We just want to welcome you guys. This is the ancient path to modern life as we align with the Hebrew roots of our faith. So tonight at sundown, we enter the month of Tevet. It is a time that God desires to connect with us. Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month. It's kind of like a Sabbath of the month. And he's asking us to give him the first fruits of our time and our devotion, to set apart the first day of the month so he can bless the rest of the days of that month. And we have a lot to share with you guys about the deep history that this month has, and also the power that comes from aligning with it. And so I want to start with a Rosh Chodesh blessing. May it be your will, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, that you renew for us a good month in our Lord Yeshua, the Messiah. Amen.
Amen. Yes. So we love doing this. We love studying out the months and sharing with you guys all the things that we mine and find. And so we always cover these three things, right? We cover the tribe, we cover the letter, and we cover the constellation that they're connected to. So we break them down into these three parts, and we do that in order to take a closer look at God's reminders of his salvation, his deliverance, and his healing grace. So if we continue to remember how he showed up for his people in the past, we can likewise have that faith that he will continue to move in our lives today. And it is very helpful because it can be kind of discouraging in the days that we're in. So we want to come alongside with you guys to really share this. So the tribe that it is associated with this month is Dan, the tribe of Dan. And Dan was the fifth son of Jacob, and he was the first son by Rachel's maidservant, Bilhah. How do you say her name?
Bilhah.
Bilhah.
Her name means unworried.
Oh, that's cool. So she was unworried. So she was the maidservant, and so Dan was her first son, and this is the one that's associated with the tribe of Tevet. So the name means to rule or to judge or to execute judgment. Very interesting. And what we're going to talk a little bit about this month is that it takes maturity to rule. So remember that's kind of a theme.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we will definitely come back to that. So, so this month represents a time to grow up and mature. So Moses gave Dan this blessing, and you can find this in Genesis 30:4-6. And we always read from the complete Jewish Bible. So here we go. It says, so she, Rachel, gave him Bilhah, her slave girl, as his wife. And Yaakov, who was Jacob, went in and slept with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Yaakov a son. Rachel said, God has judged in my favor. Indeed, he has heard me and given me a son. Therefore, she named him Dan, which is he judged. Now, she didn't hold on to that viewpoint for very long, but at this moment, she was very happy because she wanted her husband to have a son. So this was the blessing of Jacob. Genesis 49, it says, Dan will judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a viper on the road, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels. So its rider falls off backward. Wait for your deliverance, Adonai. So very, very cool to see that the blessings. It's so interesting to read about that. And then Moses gave Dan this blessing in Deuteronomy 33:22. It's of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion cub leaping forth from Bashan. So Dan the judge represents vindication on the path of law and order. And it's as objective justice is the heart of any society. And boy, are we grasping for this right now, for this judgment, right? Justice and judgment. So this is very interesting. Later on, you'll see that Samson was one of Israel's greatest judges, and he descended from the tribe of Dan. And he judged Israel for 20 years. Yet many of his tribe worshiped idols. You can read all about that in Judges, and they turned from God's ways. So the tribe of Dan is omitted from those mentioned in Revelation 7 during the time of tribulation, but he is later granted an inheritance during the millennium, which is kind of cool.
Which would be kind of something interesting to study later on. There, you know, that it's funny, every time we do these months, I just sort of find a lot more stuff that I want to research.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that with Hebrew, everything has a meaning, right? Everything that's in the scripture is there for a reason.
Yeah.
And so many times I have come across things where I'm like, why in the world is that in there? That doesn't make any sense, and blown past it, only much later to come across research and find out this huge, enormous, rich meaning that's actually attached to the very thing that I had kind of passed over and disregarded very carelessly. So anyways, all of that to say that even as we go into this, you know, there's more stuff we found out since we've written the book. There's more stuff that we continue to find out. I mean, I went down a whole rabbit trail, and anyways, that's not the point. But the point is that there's a lot here, and it's really exciting. There's always more to learn and find out, which I love that part of it. So I want to touch on Ayin is how this is pronounced, Ayin. And this is the alphabetic letter that is attached or associated with the month of Tevet. Okay, so it's the 10th month in 12 of the 12 months in the Jewish calendar. It's associated, as I said, with the Hebrew letter Ayin. Ayin is the 16th letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and in the gematria, which is sort of the numeric calculation of the Hebrew letters, because they all have a corresponding numerical value, it represents the number 70. Ayin is also one of the 7 letters that receives these special crowns called Tagin in the Torah, when written down in the Torah. So
at the top of the
the little top, kind of like a little, you can see a little crown there. So the letter Ayin is a Vav contained in a Nun. The Nun represents humility, whereas the Vav represents Torah. This is a sort of a pictographic image of, you know, the Torah descending from heaven. The words of God descend from heaven to earth. And so there's this inherent design of a hook or a shoot. It's a Semitic word meaning eye. And so this letter represents the ideas of seeing, right? Watching, of knowledge. The eye is the window of knowledge, right? And of course, it's interesting too to think about the various ways that occultic practices have kind of done that eye thing, which is, you know, it's even in our money. And anyways, don't want to get down a rabbit trail because there's a lot we could, you know.
But this is two eyes.
Yeah.
Because I saw a picture of that as well, and they had put eyes on the top where those little crowns are, and I thought that's interesting. And then when I studied it, I went, "Oh, that's why."
Yeah, there you go.
It's about the eyes,
right? So this is a month in which, given all that we've talked about, you want to focus on breaking alignments and agreements with things that keep you from seeing both your life right now and the experiences that you have lived through from a poverty mindset. And I want to be very clear, that could be money, but poverty includes a lot more than just money. The poverty is a mindset of lack. It's not measuring up or not having enough of fill in the blank. Yeah. Right. And so that poverty could be about yourself. It could be about your purpose. It could be about money, but it could be about so many other things. And so this is really a month to go after breaking those agreements, that you're kind of taking that poverty lens, that lens of lack, and shattering it, and then replacing it with God's lens. What does God say about yourself, your purpose, money, etc., right? And so one of the outcomes of a poverty mindset, could be about anything, is that you're tethered to feelings of insecurity. And because of that belief, then you engage in self-sabotaging behaviors. You do things to actually prove to yourself that the agreement is true, which all happens on the subconscious. Yeah, it's insidious, and it all happens on the subconscious level. It's something we're not aware of that we're doing. We just sort of automatically go to it, right? So the eye is a picture also of a spring or a well. So as you're recognizing and repenting of these areas in which you're looking through a poverty lens, it is equally important, maybe even more important, to be intentional in aligning with God's lens so that you allow this new life to flow into that space where the agreement once was.
So good. Yes, so good. Yes, and now we're going to talk a minute about the constellations. And I love this part. There was a time in my life that I didn't grow up with God, and I didn't grow up with any kind of spiritual direction. So I searched for that, and I went to horoscopes. I went to card readers. And when I became a Christian, I was like, get behind me. I don't want to know anything about it.
Right.
And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've been so encouraged to learn that, like many things, what God has laid out in the stars and in the skies for us to connect with him and communicate with us has been taken and made a shadow through astrology. And this has been so encouraging to learn about astronomy and the biblical perspectives, because all of it is the story of Yeshua, and it's been so cool. So this month is connected to Capricorn, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. The main meaning of this is sacrifice or atonement. Who knew that? So I just wanted to give you this quick overview because I found this to be very fascinating. The first group, which is Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, those focus on the victory of Jesus, his person, the debt paid, the battle fought and won. All of that is in those. The second grouping is Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. These focus on the fruit of his redemption. That is his bride, his church, his people.
Right.
That is what that is, his fruit. And then the third grouping is Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. And these focus on the final consummation of the Redeemer, who is reunited with his redeemed, which is, again, his bride. So I found that to be so fascinating. And we are just obviously touching on that. It's
scratching the surface.
Tip of an iceberg here, but I wanted to give you that little bit of an overview, and I encourage you to look into it, research it. There's lots of great stuff out there to look at the constellations and know. In Revelation, it says God speaks to us through the stars and the moon, and it's pretty incredible.
And the important thing there is that astrology has basically said man can use these mechanisms to predict and therefore create his own outcome based on those, right?
So true.
Whereas this is just simply saying, God's like saying, I have put my truth there for you to discover. The truth does not change. God is not trying to help us predict something. He is simply trying to confirm what he has said. He is confirming what he has promised. He is confirming his purpose for us, right? It's not like some secret mystical information that makes you like a little g god like astrology. This is actually just trying to use the stars and to affirm what God has spoken in them and to them. Right?
Yeah, that's
Truth,
so good.
right? So anyways, it's just important because I think it's I had a very similar astrology kind of a thing, and so anyways.
Yeah. So looking at Capricorn, this is so fascinating. I always knew Capricorn was a goat until we were studying out for these kinds of things. I never knew that the goat also had a tail of a fish. I did not know that. So Capricorn is depicted by half goat, half fish, and its meaning from translations of the earliest languages denotes fruitfulness and life that stems from death. Remember, we said that the meaning is atonement or sacrifice, right? So cool. So in Latin, Capricorn means atonement. Its most prominent stars in all these three languages, Hebrew, Arabic, and Syriac, all, is that how you want to say that?
Syriac, yeah.
Syriac, all mean cut off, hewn down, and the sacrifice slain. So interesting. So in all of these, this is the cool thing too about it is the stars, everybody sees these, right? Every religion, everything. So it's so interesting to see that all of these three, they say that the constellation formation depicting a goat with a drooping head and leg bent under its belly represents the falling and dying of Jesus Christ and bowing to his sacrificial atoning death. That's amazing. That's interesting. So the images of the goat and the fish are not coincidences. The Israelites used goats as sacrificial animals for sin offerings all throughout the Bible. And in particular, on the Day of Atonement, the goat was to bear the iniquity of the congregation to make atonement for them before the Lord. And that's in Leviticus 10, 16 through 17. God saved his people in prophecy are spoken of as fishes. Fish are the symbol of believers. Jeremiah, Ezekiel talk about that. And then you remember this famous words of Jesus, I will make you fishers of men. And it is through salvation and the testifying waters of baptism that the multitude of fishes, or the people, the church, right? His people and bride.
Messianic community.
Yes, I love that. The Messianic community, they sprang forth. In the Gospel of Matthew, the fish is used as a symbol for the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 4:19.
And remember, that was even for early Christians. Like, because under the persecution, you would see the symbol of the fish and you would know that it wouldn't mean anything to the Romans, but it means something to the believers. And so that was kind of how they identified.
Yeah, that's good. And so our question for you as we look at this month is, where is God taking you this year or this month? This is the ending of our month on our calendar. Where is God bringing you as we move forward into the next year? And we're going to talk about this and how we love to come together to really focus on that and bring power to our new year together, because there's power in that.
Yes, there is.
So much power in that.
So we also wanted to touch on some of the interesting things that have happened during this month throughout history. Not every month has this, but some of them do. And so there's a couple of things that are just, I think, kind of interesting. Esther was made queen, right? Back in 362 BC on the 1st of Tevet, right? That's when she officially became queen. Kind of interesting. The 8th day of Tevet is also traditionally recognized as the day the oldest translation of the Torah into Greek was completed. That's the Septuagint, right? The early sages say that there were 72 elders, each of them placed in separate rooms by King Ptolemy II, and they were asked to translate the Torah of Moses into Greek. And according to this tradition, God put it on each of their hearts to write identically as the others. But the circumstances and the motives of this king were obviously suspect from the beginning. Why on earth would a Greek king of Egypt test Jewish scholars in this way, which is kind of odd. And so Jewish tradition concedes that this miraculous translation of the 72 elders happened, but the issue was the Torah was essentially considered untranslatable. This means that there are many layers of meaning that are only revealed through the original Hebrew texts. One of the reasons why, and I don't want to get too far afield into the academics of it, but one thing that really makes this important is that Greek is a very specific language, whereas Hebrew is a more pictorial language. There are far more words in Greek than there are in Hebrew. So because Hebrew is a pictorial language and there are less words in that language, it relies heavily on context. That's why you're looking for a word that's used, and then how has that word been used across a variety of contexts, right? That's how you get the meaning. So even though that sounds a little bit maybe inefficient, it's actually a better way, right? How do we communicate things? Do we use specific statistics or do we use stories? What communicates a meaning better, a story or a statistic, right?
Story,
right? So Anyways, after the 2nd century AD, most of the Jewish world regarded the Septuagint as untrustworthy, and they also associated it with Hellenistic influences and corruption. Basically, Hellenism was kind of a movement where they were trying to make everybody, go Greek, and everything, like Greek in custom and thought, etc. And so there was a huge resistance within the Jewish community to this Hellenism because they had their own tradition, they had their own culture that they really embraced, right? Ultimately, the Christian world would endorse the Septuagint as authoritative, and it perpetuated its literal use instead of studying the Hebrew text and Jewish methods of study. And that, I think it opens up a fair question, right?
Yeah.
How much of the heresy of replacement theology traces back to the decision of the early church leaders to abandon the Hebrew text for Greek? I don't know. I mean, it's an open question.
Yeah.
The 10th.
Can I add something really quick right there? I think what's so interesting about this is we have been studying things, other books like the lost books, right? The Book of Enoch, these different books that we read, and it goes into deeper understanding. It's realizing that the Bible was written to the Jews that already knew those contexts.
Right.
It's like we learn about Jacob and his mom and him tricking his dad. And it's very easy to get a perspective of Jacob as this liar, deceiver, and all those things. But when you understand all of the context of him and knowing that his mom was actually given a vision when she was pregnant with him, that the younger would
rule over the elder.
Like there were so many things that you realized that where she was coming from. And when you don't know the context of these, like he was saying earlier, you could just brush over something and go, wow, that's, and so there was something lost in the translation. Yeah. And I loved how it said there was this idea that it can't be translated because there's so many layers to it. And even that replacement theology of understanding, I think this is so huge because there's such a, when Christians believe and are taught that they replaced the Jews as the chosen and not being grafted in, like that's something that is very serious.
Yeah.
and interesting. When we were reading this, I was like, wow, that's interesting that's where it possibly came from.
Yeah. Yeah. So the 10th day of Tevet is a fast day known as Asara B'Tevet. 2 Kings 25 tells us that Nebuchadnezzar began Babylon's siege of Jerusalem on the 10th day of Tevet. This would begin the battle that ultimately destroyed the temple and sent the Jews into the 70-year Babylonian exile. It is also a day of mourning in modern Israel for people whose date or place of death is unknown, right? It's a day that many who perished in the Holocaust, for example, are remembered because nobody knows exactly, the date of that. In Zechariah 8, it says, "Thus saith Adonai Sarat, the fast of the 4th, the fast of the 5th, the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th month will become joy, gladness, and cheerful mohadim. Therefore, love, truth, and shalom." Each of these fasts, interestingly enough, occurs on days of national tragedy. And the prophetic promise there is that they become joyful holidays in the Messianic kingdom, right? Because Jesus is all about redemption through reconciliation, right? Also, one of the elements in there is the Sadducees, right, are kicked out. Nehemiah rebuilds the wall, which is sort of a familiar story. That's why I'm kind of skipping over that a little bit. But the Sadducees, they're kind of interesting. They're mentioned, but then we don't really learn much about them. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were sort of the two preeminent Jewish sects, right? The Sadducees tended to be the more elitist, political, Hellenized segment. They got along and were much more favorable in their opinions of the Romans, whereas the Pharisees were more of the people and definitely not fans of the Romans. And so that there's kind of a, they both acknowledged Moses and his, books, but there are important distinctions. And again, this is a really good example of missing the context on something. So, for example, Paul is being brought before the Sanhedrin, and he says, I am Paul. I am, a Pharisee. I've come from a long line of Pharisees. I believe firmly in the resurrection. And again, we go, okay, Paul's just, yeah, we all do. We all believe in the resurrection, yada, yada. And we go on. Well, the Sadducees didn't. And the Sadducees and the Pharisees were both on the member of the Sanhedrin. There was a 70 member council that basically was, think of it like the Supreme Court, but with 70 members, right? So they presided over all things Jewish. And Paul knew that the Pharisees and the Sadducees had an important distinction in how they saw the afterlife. The Sadducees thought once you're dead, that's it. You just sort of disintegrate into the dust, whereas the Pharisees actually believed in an afterlife. So Paul delivers this statement knowing that that's going to create an uproar. And of course, there's this big, debate that immediately emerges between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the uproar becomes so enormous that they actually have to send Roman soldiers in to disperse and to protect Paul. So anyways, again, a lot of examples of why, this matters and how these little contexts can be missed when we're not aware of it. But the other thing that's interesting is that they basically went away after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. The reason being that their responsibilities were primarily connected to maintaining the temple. So when the temple goes away, their primary reason for existence kind of goes away, and they just sort of, merged back into the political landscape, which is really where they were anyway. They were more political than spiritual. So anyways.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's just a little bit of background. There's some kind of important and some cool stuff that happened during this time. So,
yes. So we're going to look now at the focus of the month. And this is divine grace is the focus of the month. There we go. So the focus here is divine grace. And it's so amazing. So the number 10, first of all, is the number of godly authority. So I love that when you think about that, there's 10 commandments. There's, and everything that goes to 10 is about godly authority. So a powerful thing to do this month is to pray for godly authority to be established in our lives, in our churches, in our country, in our world. And we put this out there today on social media to be united in this prayer, to let's really lean in and be united in praying for this, connecting to that is the theme of the month, is this godly authority. In Jewish tradition, Tevet, which is mentioned in the book of Esther, was acquired in Babylonia. It shares a root with the Hebrew word tav, which means good. So it has a root of that as well. The month begins with the last days of Hanukkah. It's the only month, and Hanukkah is the only holiday that spans over 2 months. So our days here begin, I believe we're in day 6 of Hanukkah. And it's amazing because by internalizing, we are grasping the message of the ever increasing lights of the menorah. And it reminds us of the power of good over evil, which I love that is the root word in this. God is amazing. Everything connects and it's so beautiful. So we can reveal the good that is hidden in our lives and in the world around us. So praying for that, praying to see that even in the dark, right? The light shines the most in the dark, right? But the overarching message of Hanukkah, in the midst of destruction, there is mercy. So beautiful message in Hanukkah. So even if it feels like things are being destroyed, falling apart, there is always mercy. There is always life. Like Dan was talking about earlier, getting into that flow. It's the first month of the winter season. In fact, the entire winter season is called Tevet. So they say in Hebrew, Tekufat Tevet, which Tekufat means the season of. So the way that they do seasons is they call the season the first month that's in that season. So Tevet is also winter. in Hebrew rather. So there's a story that is passed down after an act of deep betrayal, talking about this idea of, and it's connected in the Torah reading of this month. So it's passed down that after an act of deep betrayal, the children of a particular family were about to reconcile with their father. So they gathered what was to be this time of being together after months of effort to reestablish this relationship. And one question remains that the Jewish sages ask is, could the children reunite with their father before they healed the division between themselves? And I can't help but think about this, division amongst different sects of Christianity, different sects of Judaism, all of these things, right? So he's talking about healing that division. So in aligning with that theme, this Torah portion describes how Jewish people finally completed the construction of the tabernacle after months of tremendous effort. And this was the place where the divine presence would dwell, where people would see that there was a reconciliation with that sin of the golden calf because it was forgiven. And God would once again dwell in their midst as he had at Sinai. So how does this reconciliation take place? So as the people gathered at the tabernacle, waiting for a sign, Moses taught them that in order to heal the relationship with their father, the children must first heal their relationship with each other. And he used the story of the betrayal of Joseph's brothers by explaining that the jealousy and the division, which led to the sale of Joseph, we all know this story very well, is the precise character trait which led to the division and separation from God at the foot of the mountain when they built the golden calf. And in order to find harmony with God, it must be eradicated from their midst.
Yeah.
So interesting. He's talking so much here. And I love, even when you study that out, when they were moving in to the bottom of, that's Mount Sinai, right? Where that happened. At the beginning, the word used in Hebrew is plural. And then when they are all camped at the bottom, the word that is used is singular to show that they were of one purpose, one body, that messianic community. It's so awesome.
That is
so
cool.
He's saying this division must be eradicated, right? So it's very interesting to note that Jesus's last prayer, the last prayer that he prayed was all about unity. And it's about the Jews and the Gentiles coming together in an understanding of who he was, who Jesus was, that he is the Messiah.
Yeah.
He is our Messiah. So as we are finishing out this year, this focus is reconciliation within your own heart towards whatever is unfinished, right? It's about reconciling for yourself, whatever is unfinished emotionally, spiritually, tying up those loose ends that way. And we love, and we're going to talk at the end about a way that we love to do that together, that we do every year, that we start out the year by doing that. But it's really interesting that God would have this month be focused on that.
Yeah, it is kind
I
of
love
cool.
that.
And so this is the verse that we're reflecting on. And it's from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. For God gave us a spirit who produces not timidity, but power, love, and self-discipline. This is a very simple verse, but it has a lot of depth to it. The spirit is the driver, the source, the originator of our love, our self-discipline, all of that. This is what we basically bring into our life, comes from the spirit, how we function in our life. Right? So therefore, our maturity depends upon the depth of our reliance upon him. The more we rely on the spirit, right, for power, love, and self-discipline, the more mature we are.
Yeah.
Right? Immaturity is relying more on yourself than relying on the spirit. That's immaturity. We're after maturity. That is our goal.
Yeah.
And so in the spirit, this is something else that kind of grieves my heart. Like, we don't really talk about, just in, like, say, Western Christianity, we really don't talk about the Spirit very much. And he is critical.
Yeah.
Jesus even said, I'm going away so that he who is greater than I it can come and be with you. I mean, so it's like, anyways, the other side trail we don't go down, but the Spirit is amazing and he's incredible. And so we talked about this connection to the tribe of Dan, right? Which Tevet is the month, and it means to rule or judge or execute judgment. Well, it takes maturity to rule or judge or execute judgment, right? And maturity is a prerequisite of that.
Yeah.
Right. God is therefore calling us to maturity in whatever he has given to us to have dominion over. And so in that, maturity is not optional. It never was. It never was.
Right.
But it is especially not now. We do not and cannot allow ourselves the option of immaturity, right? We need to be wholehearted in our love and devotion to God, and out of that wholeheartedness comes maturity, right? So the maturity is something that needs to be in our mindsets. We need to be willing to go to war when God calls us to stand for our inheritance in him and to not back down, right? To not back down. So if you are not spending time at some point this year to make sure that your emotions, your life, your goals, your ambitions, your past, your experiences, your everything has not been turned over to the Spirit of God, then they are going to come out. They're going to come out and they're going to torment you on some level, right? Because it just really comes down to, who do we trust with our wounded places more? Ourselves, our own wisdom, our own understanding, or God?
Yeah.
Right? And if we're having a hard time trusting God, rather than go down the rabbit trail of guilt and shame over that, lean into that more. Let this be a time to figure out, why don't I trust God more? What is in my relationship with him or in my past that is causing me not to be able to wholeheartedly trust him, and invite God into that and deal with that, right? And so this is something that we really want to be wrestling with and thinking about, especially as this, the Gregorian year is coming to a close. The Jewish year is, we're still kind of in the beginning, as it were. But we're going to go into this idea of self-governance a lot more, because it's really, it's like, who has control of the self, right? Spirit or self, right? So that's kind of the thing.
And so much that we learn and are exposed to in our culture and in everything is the opposite of that. And I love all the things that you guys are sharing over here. I'm trying to keep these over here. And Monique, I love, yes, isn't it funny that the one sent to empower us is not spoken of much? Yeah, it's so true. Coincidence? Nope. No, yes. And it's so powerful. Yeah, very much so. So the end, as we come to the end of the year, there's so much that God is, I think, exposing, and we love to talk about all that. So we're going to talk a little bit here about alignment into action. So what do we do here? And we know, you guys know our tagline, we've had this for the last 5-6 years, is that we are here to bridge the gap between inspiration and destiny. And we are ready to step boldly where God is calling us in 2024. And I love that tagline, because it's like, where inspiration is, which is where what you need to start. Inspiration is important, but it won't get you to your destiny. It's great to be inspired, and we love coming together and being inspired, but we are there to fill in those steps between those things, right? So that help you to walk together, because we're stronger together. We're stronger that way. So like Dan mentioned, we're already into the Hebrew year 5784, right? This is our second month into that year.
Yeah.
So we are dwelling in what I love to call those hidden time months, which God is giving us to prepare to step into the next season, right?
Yeah.
So that we can step into 2024 being, I don't know if you're ever fully prepared, right? It's like telling someone what's going to happen when they have their baby, when they're pregnant. You're never fully prepared for so many things in this life, right? And I remember vividly being so excited about 2020 and being so excited about a new decade and a new everything. And then, man, it was like smack. And so every year I'm a little bit like, oh God, what's going to happen? But it's still, there's something about this transition into a new year and all the possibilities that go with that. So we're very, very excited. And always we love walking this with you guys. So Dan and I have been away. We've been gone. This last week we were in Hawaii, and it was amazing how God even worked that out. We went to Hawaii for our honeymoon. 25 years ago. And we went to Hawaii again for our anniversary in our 20th year. And it was funny how this trip kind of came together for us to be there on our 25th. So that was very cool and very encouraging. But we have been preparing ourselves. It's been a lot of, I feel like, stripping down and even the things that we talked about today. I felt in my spirit so much wrestling today with poverty mindset on things and looking at things overwhelmed because it's so natural to just lean on my own understanding and my own strength. And
or just even looking at your circumstances.
Yes.
And not realizing that God is the one that controls all of that. So it doesn't even matter how bad your circumstances look.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't diminish God. Like God doesn't suddenly become greater or lesser because your circumstances are better or worse, right? He's still the same God in all situations, in all circumstances. So it's kind of encouraging that way. Yeah. It's just hard to remember that when you're in the bad circumstances, right?
Yes. And so what we're super excited about is that our app is ready to go. Our Inspired Life app is done. We are now live on the Apple platform. We are live also on the Android platform, so you can download the app. The app is free to download, and we are going to be probably right after Christmas. We haven't decided what day, but what we have on there is a 7-day. It's probably like a challenge, but it's more like a 7-day walk through.
Yeah, it's like 7 days of discovery, honestly. It's just 7 days of discovery.
7 days of discovery. And so we are going to be doing that together, and we want to invite everyone. That's free. You can do that, and you can check it out, download it, create your account and all of those things. And then if you are a member, and if you want to become a member, if you aren't already, there's a way that you can do that there. But to become a member of Inspired Life, and that is where we're going to be doing our lives, and where we're going to have all of this is going to live there. And there's so much that we're going to do with it. You're able to message each other, and it's going to be super cool. We're very, very excited about it. We've been working on this for a lot longer than we thought. It was
way longer than we thought.
But here we are. And we're also excited because we always start out the new year with our 1-day workshop. And we're going to be doing that in January. I believe it's going to be the 3rd Saturday in January. I forgot to look at the date, but I believe it's going to be that Saturday. And we had such an awesome time last year going through our book. You want to hold up the book? We are getting the finishing touches on the new book.
This is last year's
book.
Yeah.
And this book, it takes you through the whole year, but the first half or a third of it, we actually do in the workshop. Yeah. And it's amazing. What we do is we are using the tools that we have learned to get emotionally complete with last year. Yeah. It gives you an opportunity to get complete with everything about the year, the positive, the negative,
and everything in between.
Yeah. And there's incredible power of getting emotionally complete. Yeah. These are the tools that we talk about to help you gain maturity, especially in that area of emotional maturity. And like Dan said, this time of the history that we are in, having that maturity, emotional maturity is not an option. It really is not an option. So we are just so encouraged. We use these tools. We use these tools all the time, and we share them. We share them with our clients. We share them with you guys, and we're very excited to do that. So this will be an incredibly powerful and inspiring way to prepare for this next season where God is calling all of us next. Yeah. So one of the things that I love is this idea of dominion rest. And we love to weave that through
Mm.
everything that we're talking about, because our goal is dominion rest. And what it means is it's actually being in the rhythm of partnering with God. So that's that feeling that you get when you are living in that alignment. And it doesn't mean that you've arrived or you're on top of the mountain. It means that you are living with a rhythm with God. And there's a rest that comes from that, from stepping
Yeah.
into your inheritance, stepping into that. So we love living in this rhythm with you all, and we send our blessings on this very special first day of the month of Tevet, which where we are in Texas, it is now dark. So we have officially entered in to that day. So if you are part of our Inspired Life membership, we are so excited to see you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, we are going to have our last Zoom call for this year of 2023.
Yeah.
We will be on the Zoom call at 7 p.m. Central Time, and we are super excited to see you there. We have much to share, and we have some homework for you. If you are a part of the group, we will be discussing this on the Zoom call. So that is the homework.
All right.
Tell them about
so
that.
Here it is. So the first question is to really think about, do you have any agreements, or is there any alignment in your thinking with poverty? And remember, we've already talked about how poverty is way more than money. It can be money, but it includes a lot more. It's a sense of lack.
Yeah.
Right? It's a sense of not enough. It's a sense of anxiety over that. It can even lead to envy, right? Because then you envy people that don't seem to have, they seem to be getting along great. It seems like,
So
they have the
easy for them.
Instagram life, right?
Yeah.
Like everything is going great, even if it's not, and everything looks awesome, even if it isn't, and all that, right? So what we're really thinking about is to really think through this idea of poverty, right? Like areas in your life where you feel a sense of lack, right? And write them down, name them.
Yeah.
Name them. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take that agreement and we are going to bring it to God for him to break it. Okay. We are going to invite Yeshua into those areas where we ache, where we hurt, where we yearn, where we hope, where we have disappointment, right? All those agreements where poverty and all of its manifestations lives. Write them down, name them. And then the second part of that homework is now write out your new agreement. And this agreement is going to be activated by who? The Spirit. The Spirit, right? He is our source of power, love, and self-discipline. He is, right? And it's kind of actually, I find that a little bit liberating because I don't have to like manifest self-discipline. I don't have to manifest love. I can simply invite the Spirit to help me do that. So you're going to write down your new agreement, right? Your new agreement based on the Spirit, based on the truth, right? Based on what God says. Not what our circumstances say, not what the past has said, not whatever our, humanistic self-help guru has said, but really what does God say? And base your agreement on him, right? Right. And then speak that aloud daily. Just remind that, declare that out loud and bring that under the authority of Yeshua, right? Invite him into that. He stands at the door and knocks. He's asking to be let into all these places in our hearts, in our lives, in our past, in our experiences where we need healing and refreshment and alignment with what is true. Okay. So those are your two questions that we'll be kind of digging into on the call tomorrow night. We would love to see y'all there. In the meantime, have a great year, and we'll see you in the call tomorrow.